Spring training is open, and B. Scott is here to talk about it with me. Let's do this.
What's up, H-Town? Welcome to the Believe in Astros podcast, your home for all things Astros, with your hosts, sports writer Jeff Balke and Astros broadcaster and former third baseman Jeff Balke. Now, here's Balke and Blummer.
What is up, Astros fans? Welcome to episode 104 of the Believe in Astros podcast on the Believe Podcasting Network. I'm Jeff Balke. It's spring training, baby. It's also new cap season, right? I've already got a couple. This is one. I got a couple more. My wife is super annoyed already that I'm buying new hats. But my hat closet has got to get bigger. That's because the hat game has got to be strong. Here with me,
I like that one.
Hey,
like
appreciate
that.
it. Yeah, I like this one too.
Yeah.
Man, I love the flex hats. Those are my favorites out of all of them because I have a big head, so the fitted hats, it's hard for me to get exactly the right size. And
see, I'm the opposite though. The flex hats don't look good over the dreadlocks.
Oh yeah, so that makes total sense.
I've got to go fitted hats.
Yeah,
or at least the flat bill. I got to go flat bill for it to look right.
I can't do the flat bill because I'm way too white for that. So if I wear the flat bill, I look like a nerd. I look like a super nerd.
Nah,
I look too weird for
short,
that.
Man.
Everybody,
welcome
my friend from Sports Radio 610, Brandon Scott. B. Scott, how are you this morning, my friend?
Man, I'm doing well, man. I'm happy to be here anytime that I'm invited on to join you and talk about the Astros. It's always an honor and a pleasure. And look, man, we're right here in the thick of it. Spring training. Baseball season's really right. We say it's right around the corner, but once spring training hits, man, it's begun.
It's on.
So I'm ready to get after it, man.
Yeah. So, I know on Twitter your name, or on X, excuse me, whatever the hell it is, your name on there is B. Scott from the Hiram Clark. Did I ever tell you that I played a gig in the Hiram Clark years ago? I played a backyard party in the HC. A really good buddy of mine, rest in peace, my buddy Joe Jackson, was an amazing percussion player. He was from Hiram Clark as well. And we drove deep into the heart of the Hiram Clark and played a backyard party that had no fence. It just looked out on the bayou. We played for like 3 hours and ate and drank until we were silly. So I love me some Hiram Clark.
Yeah, I'm right. I grew up in Windsor Village.
Yeah,
and so the bayou is right, literally across the street. So my neighbor across the street, their backyards are basically on the bayou.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's how a lot of them are, man. I went over there to a number of parties, but I played one. That was a rollicking good time. It's awesome. First, we need to talk about your Super Bowl experience. But was this the first time you've gone to a Super Bowl and Radio Row and done all that stuff?
Yeah, man. My Radio Row initiation, first time doing the Super Bowl, all of the whole shebang, and only my second time in Vegas. So for it to all go down like that was really incredible. I'm gonna be honest with you. It started off pretty rocky because here's the thing, man. I'd only been to Vegas once, and it was in the summertime, and it was beautiful. But every Vegas story that I've ever heard from any friend or acquaintance has never included rain. I've never heard anybody
I forgot about that. You guys had all that rain
talked about.
Yeah,
I've never heard anybody talk about it.
Yeah, and the funny thing about it is, if you get 1 inch of rain in the desert, it's like us getting like 12 inches of rain. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, but since I've spent so little time in the desert, I had not really considered that.
Who would?
It just, I'm going there for the Super Bowl. I'm gonna go talk to Patrick Mahomes and Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, and I'm gonna go be at the NFL Honors with C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson and D'Amico Ryans and the McNairs, and I'm gonna see all of these NFL, I'm running to Gayle King, Jerry Jones and Robert Kraft are going to be there. I'm going to be right there rubbing elbows with these people. I'm not thinking about the rain. And dude, it rained. It rained, man. In our hotel, I stayed at the Link, which is on the Strip. It's kind of connected to Harrah's. And we're there, ride sharing. But the rideshare area at this particular hotel is right there in the flood. There's no way to get to your ride share without wetting your shoes and socks or whatever it is. You need boots or a boat to get to your Uber.
And that's messed up.
So that part of it was frustrating. Once it stopped raining, it was an incredible experience.
I bet.
Man. Parties, red carpets, opening night, like I mentioned, where we were able to, interview the players. We had access to the players throughout the week, but once I did that Monday night, I didn't, keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
We just kind of stuck to Radio Row. But Radio Row itself, incredible experience.
Yeah.
I'm not a big gambling guy.
Yeah, me either.
I like to, when I spend my money, it's not to say that I'm not frivolous with money sometimes.
You just want to show something to show for it.
I want to receive something back, and we can debate and argue about what it is that I got back,
right? Whether
it was a frivolous purchase or whether I'm stupid for doing it,
right?
But I'm getting something.
Exactly.
I'm getting something, and I like it, and it's my money.
That's right.
So that's kind of my. But I had some cool experiences with that. Observing and watching and people watching and just the whole thing, man. I spent 5 days there, which is way too long.
Yep. But
for the experience, man, I would not have traded it.
Yeah, gambling's one of those things. My wife and I were in. This is when she was still the editor at Houstonian magazine, and we were she was doing a story. We did this bizarre story where we drove an RV to Lake Charles and went to the Golden Nugget. I have no idea why. It was so weird. But we literally went to the craps table. I lost $33 in the span of about 90 seconds. I was like, that's good. Let's go eat dinner. I'm good. I don't need to lose any more money. I need something back for my cash.
Yeah. I remember my first time in Vegas winning maybe like $150, $160, I don't know, something like that, a small amount of money. And I kept playing.
Yep.
That's
how it works.
And by the end of it, I'd lost not only that amount, but I'd lost 60.
House always wins.
Yeah, and we're talking about a very small amount of money here, but at the time, all of it was a lot to me.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of dabbling. I'm there, like I said, I'm there with my parents, early adulthood.
Yeah.
Don't have a lot of money, And
I'm good. I'll keep
$60.
I'll keep buying. I'll just keep buying baseball caps, man. That's good for me.
I'll $60 back.
Exactly. But before we dig too much into baseball, it is Black History Month. I wanted to mention condolences to the family of former Rocket Robert Reed, who passed away yesterday. He had a long battle with cancer. Look, Robert Reed was one of my favorites growing up. I used to wear my socks up high like he did. I actually got to meet him. I went to when I was a kid in like 5th grade, I went to Rudy Tomjanovich basketball camp, which is at Blinn College. And I actually, weirdly enough, I got really sick during camp. I had to leave about halfway through, but I did get to meet Robert Reed before I left. And I remember just the sweetest guy, and just a really good, cool basketball player. Like not just a great basketball player, but cool. Like he was like, I always loved guys like him. I love guys like Dr. J, and I loved Rodney McRae when he played for I love Robert Horry. I love those like long, lean, sort of small forward type guys of old. And man, he was just the best. So really condolences to his family, because it sucks. Cancer sucks.
Yeah. I spent a lot of the morning reading about two guys who were greats of their time, really, really good for their time, and just before my time.
Yeah.
And that's J.R. Richard and Robert Reed. I knew we were going to talk about J.R. on the show. Yeah. And then Robert Reed's passing comes up, yesterday, before we meet. So I spent some time just looking. I'd obviously known about him being a part of those runs in the 80s. But just spent a lot of time just going back and looking at the, the change of ownership in the 80s, the change from the Maloofs, the change that ultimately led to Moses Malone's being traded to the 76ers, like things that I knew about but just did not think about a lot. Yeah. Because they happened before my time. Yeah. Spent a lot of time reading about it, and I got into that rabbit hole because I wanted to read more about Robert Reed, who by the way, as you mentioned, that is all I've heard. And it's not, people have always qualified it like, it's not just because he's passing away. This is really the truth. He's one of the nicest human beings that you'll ever come across if you're fortunate enough to come across him.
Yeah, so, very sweet, very soft-spoken. I actually ran into him 25 years ago. I was at the Magnolia Bar and Grill, which used to be at the corner of like Richmond and Fountain View, and I was actually playing a gig, and he happened to walk in and he was eating, and on a break I just went up to him and I said, I was one of those, I don't normally introduce myself to people like that. It's just, he's like a big hero of mine growing up, and I wanted to mention that I'd met him at Rudy T's basketball camp, and he was just as sweet as he could be. He and Calvin Murphy were my two guys growing up when I was really young, because that was, when Robert Reed was playing early 80s, I was, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, something like that. And so I really enjoyed watching him play. I loved his style of play, and he and Calvin were my two guys for sure. Really fascinating time for the Rockets too. A lot of interesting players back then. Worth taking a look back if you've never looked back at them. You mentioned J.R. Richard. I'm really glad you did. The Athletic is doing this piece. It's these 13 aces, and they're talking specifically about black pitchers in baseball, which is, has been an outlier over many years. Richard, I was too young really to see him in his prime. I was, 76, 77 in there. But I did see him, maybe in 80, like right at the tail end before he had his stroke. His story is incredible, because never mind the fact that he was this dominating, intimidating pitcher on an Astros team that already had Nolan Ryan, who might be the most intimidating pitcher of all time.
And Negro.
Yeah. Yes. And exactly. Negro was playing for that team too. I mean, and Mike Scott came onto that team. I mean, it was just a crazy roster of pitchers in the Astrodome, by the way, which was not a hitter's park by any means. But the other thing too is his story is amazing. He was homeless, right? He had a stroke. He lost his career. He ended up living under a bridge in Houston, and somebody found him, like a reporter. I don't remember the whole story. He had this comeback where he came back into society again. Became a minister, worked with a lot of young kids, just a gentle giant. I mean, a huge guy, 6'7", and just so sweet. I met him once many years ago, and he was just as nice as you could possibly imagine, and just an incredible story for somebody who went literally from the pinnacle, just being a terrifying pitcher for people, to a guy who ended up with nothing. I mean, it's amazing, that story and how it turned around, and just it's so deserving to be among this group of just incredible pitchers.
Yeah, one of the best pitchers in baseball from about 76 to 80.
Yeah, that's
somewhere
right.
Somewhere in there, up until the point where, he has a stroke and his career is derailed or cut short early.
Yeah.
But a fascinating figure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that stood out to me about J.R. Richard is when he passed away a few years ago now. Dusty Baker at the time is the manager of the Astros, and he's asked about him, and I've heard him talk about this since then. He mentions, he faced J.R. Richard, but also, faced Nolan Ryan. And he said, hey, man, Nolan Ryan, this is not a knock on Nolan Ryan. He's great. He's nasty. Like, his resume speaks for itself.
Yeah.
But guys feared J.R. Richard a little more, because I remember talking about a guy back in the late 70s, early 80s with a 90-mile-an-hour slider.
Yeah.
Fastball touching 100, and was also wild. Like, he could strike you out. He might hit you. He might throw a wild pitch. There's no telling what's happening.
He was Randy Johnson before Randy Johnson was Randy Johnson. I mean, that's really kind of what he. I mean, Johnson was a little bit taller and obviously a lefty, but that was the thing. He was feared and intimidating, and the thing about him too. I don't know if you ever saw him, but he wasn't just tall. He was a big dude. Like, this dude easily could have played football. I mean, he was big. And that ball had a weird launch angle for guys, so it was hard for them to see it. So can you imagine a 99-mile-an-hour fastball coming out of a 6'7" guy, and from that angle, it must be terrifying. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Well, but also, I mean, you mentioned the size. a multi-sport athlete who chose baseball at that size. You hear a lot of guys who are of average size who can play a lot of different sports and maybe they choose baseball. But when you're 6'7" and can play everything and choose baseball, that I think is, stands out to me. And man, I'm glad he did, because the stories that you hear about J.R. Richard are pretty legendary. Yeah. So
Astro Hall of Famer now too. Just a really great story on The Athletic. You should definitely go check it out. I saw you posted this morning. I've linked to it as well. We should mention too, as we're getting into spring training, is it just me, or am I totally jacked up about spring training just because of all the videos that people are posting? Like every day we've got videos of like Josh Hader throwing batting practice to Alex Bregman, Jordan like smacking bombs in the batting cage. Like, where has this been all my life?
So I haven't talked to any of our friends who are there yet, and I imagine you and I both know plenty of people who are there. But I am able to connect this to my experience at Astros spring training and like connect some dots here. And I feel like, and I'm going to talk to some people about this to verify, but this is just my feeling. Yeah. I feel like they've expanded some access.
I feel like that's true too. It's
got to be.
And I some of that might be Joe Espada. He's certainly, look, we're going in a very different direction in terms of just interviews with Espada than with Dusty Baker. I mean, Espada's pretty, honest and frank. I found him in every interview. I've found him to be very candid. Blummer loves Espada. He talked about him on here before. He said he's like a really good dude. So I feel like he's a guy that might open things up a little bit more. Maybe this is part of that,
Yeah. No, I'm not sure. I definitely. I haven't met anybody who's not a fan of Espada. Anybody who knows Espada who's not a fan of him. So, and then I would include myself in that mix. So, I think I'm excited for Joe Espada. I think it's a really good baseball team. And this is no disrespect to Joe Espada or Dusty Baker or anyone. Of course not. But it's hard to mess this thing up. This is like this is a good team, man.
It's a freight train.
But even within that context, I'm excited for him and the opportunity and to see what kind of job he's going to do. I know he's been waiting on this for a long time, so that's going to be really cool. But on the access point, like I can remember 4 years ago now being there, and so this is right before COVID. The spring train, it's the sign stealing spring training.
Oh yeah,
it's the COVID spring right before COVID shuts everything down.
Year.
It's the 2020 spring training. Wow. All right. That's the one I'm at. And I can remember finding my way into the batting cages with Jose Altuve, George Springer, Michael Brantley. I'm in there with these guys, but I don't realize it's my first time there at spring training. I don't realize that I'm not supposed to be. There's not like a clear signage, at least from what I could see. And I'm being honest with you. I didn't try to sneak in there. I didn't realize where I was supposed to be.
I've had those experiences before too. You're working as a writer, reporter, and you just end up in the wrong spot. I've been there.
Yeah, but the key is here that no one stopped me. No one had stopped me from being there. And so I just kind of go there. I see these guys over there. I'm like, all right, I'm hanging in. And I hung out in the batting cage and then talked with Jose Altuve.
Wow, cool.
About hitting for, I don't know, 5 minutes maybe not even that long, before somebody realized that somebody was in there that wasn't supposed to be in there. And it was like, honest mistake or whatever. But I say all that to say, there are certain things that you had access to, and maybe this isn't the case. Maybe it's all the access and it's just something about more videos. I don't know. But it feels like there's a chance that we're just seeing a little bit more because they're letting you see a little bit more. So
I will say
part of it is cool.
Yeah, and for people who aren't, who haven't gone to, worked as a, as a reporter or anything, or writer for this, you have to understand, like, there are places where you go where they're sensitive for sure. Then normally they'll just tell you, but it's a funny thing if you've never gone. I remember the first time I went to an Astros thing. You don't really know. So their best bet is to find the senior guys and just follow them, right? Yep. Just keep an eye on, like in the Astros, see where Brian McTaggart and Chandler Rome are going and just kind of stick to their coattails, right? Because it's the easiest way to not get yourself in trouble. I was actually shooting when the Rockets had their 50th anniversary celebration, and all the guys came back. You know, Hakeem was there, Vernon Maxwell, like everybody was there. I was actually there to cover because they had a big halftime celebration, and I was shooting it. So I was out there with my camera. Well, before the game, right? Well, during the first quarter, I just walked down to the photographer area, right? Like not even thinking about it, not even in a second thinking about it. And there's a picture hanging on my wall of James Harden dunking that I took at that thing. That's like a really great photo. And I'm sitting down there, and all of a sudden, Jenny Zentner, who used to work for the Rockets, she's like, "What are you doing? You can't be down here." I was like, "I didn't know. Nobody said don't come down here." So it is something that happens. You know, you get in there, and you're like, but the thing is, and oftentimes it's totally innocent. You're not in there like trying to film secrets. You're just like, why am I suddenly standing in a locker room around naked guys and no one else is in here but me? Like it feels just strange, you know? So it can get confusing, but I think you're right. The access this year feels like, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to ask. I've had Brian McTaggart on before. I'm going to try and get him on again. I'm going to have to ask him if he's seen this. Like, because I don't remember seeing guys throwing live BP. Right. I don't remember really seeing that in the past. And maybe it has and I just missed it, but it feels a little different to me. You're right. That's a good point you make about that.
Yeah. And we have, I do feel like we've seen, like I've seen live BP before, but I haven't seen as much of it translated to, and maybe, I wonder if it's this, Jeff. What if it just feels like the Astros or like pitching is a bigger story this year for a number of reasons? I don't know. That could be part of it too. Like we may be swayed because of how much we're thinking about Astros
It's true.
pitching.
And maybe there is more. I know like there are some radio stations and some places where they're emphasizing video a little bit more now too. That might be a part of it. I mean, look,
that's 100%.
Look, 790 is doing a ton of video, but they're the Astros flagship. So maybe they're getting access that others are not getting just because, you know, they are the flagship. And so maybe there's some guys that are getting a little more access. It's hard to know, but it is interesting. I love seeing it. I love watching these guys because, you know, I mean, when else do you get a chance to see like, you know, Hunter Brown versus, you know, Chas McCormick or whatever it was, you know, I mean, it's pretty fun to get a chance to see that. So having said that, let's talk a little bit about some guys to watch in spring training this year. I'm actually writing about this today. 5 guys that I think are guys to watch. I'm going to be curious to hear what your thoughts about this are too. I'll start. My first guy out of the gate is Christian Javier. And the reason I have him on my list right out of the gate is, first of all, I've heard from people that he is apparently jacked. Like he has come into camp like shredded, right? And he and Hunter Brown apparently had a very, very intense offseason, specifically working towards keeping them fresh for a full season. I mean, both of them pitched way more than they had ever pitched in their lives last year. Of course, Javier was in the WBC as well, which couldn't have helped him. And he certainly tailed off towards the end of the year, then kind of was on the injured list and then came back and pitched well again. But to me, I think his longevity is really a huge key for them because honestly, I think Christian Javier might have the best stuff on the team. Like he might be the most unhittable guy on the team. Yeah.
So I know in prepping for this, I thought about you, like Jeff's going to really limit me to 5 guys, 5 guys to watch. Really, Jeff?
Oh, believe me, there's going to be others in here for sure.
Well,
they're going to
And here's the thing about it. Here's what I landed on, too, before I get to Javier. There's this thing I landed on. Like, Jeff and I don't have all day to talk about this.
Right.
Even though we could talk
spend
about this
hours
forever.
Dissecting every single position, every play, for sure.
This podcast could absolutely derail everything else about the rest of our day.
That's exactly right.
So I thought about that, too. I'm like, dude, Jeff, I've got 5 pitchers that I'm watching.
Same.
Like, before we even get to the starters, before we even get to the bullpen, before we get to the position players, I got 5 pitchers that I'm thinking about, and Javier's on the list.
100%.
And I like that he's number 1 on your list because you make a similar point to something that we've talked about on the radio, on Sports Radio 610. It's like Christian Javier Christian Javier and Framber Valdez both have this thing where you want to see a bounce back of sorts. Mm-hmm. But Christian Javier is the one where, like, if he taps into it, like you feel like you've seen close to peak Framber or at least what elite Framber looks like. We've just seen the flashes and the doses of the Christian Javier. We've never seen it like over what feels like a full sample size or a healthy sample size of Christian Javier being the Christian Javier that we expect him to be, or I guess as Astros fans probably wish for him to be. And so because of that, are still unclear on, how good is this guy really? Because we know what he looks like at his best, but it just doesn't happen often enough or consistently enough. It happens in some key moments.
Yeah, it sure does.
I mean, Christian Javier's got some legendary postseason moments for the Astros, and I want to give him his proper due and respect for that, as we talk about him. But yeah, you do want to see him take a step. I always sort of make this joke about him whenever he's struggling. And I would add, if Blummer were here, I'd ask him this too. Like, hey, is that invisible still invisible or what? Dude. Like, can they see it now or not? Like, what's going on with it?
It's a fascinating question.
To see.
It's a fascinating question. And I mean,
because that's a superpower, right?
From everything I've been told, it's still very, very difficult for guys to get their eyes on it when he throws it, just from the way that he throws the ball. So, I think, and it's to your point, you're right. I mean, I heard you and Sean talking about this yesterday when you're on with him. Sean and I both agreed, by the way, Sean's a good buddy of mine. We both agreed that they need to have a streaming camera, like on Astros.com, of like all the bullpen sessions and like they should just have it streaming so you can just go on there and watch it. That's probably all I'd do all day. I wouldn't get any work done, but to your point about Javier, I think you're right. Look, he is younger. We forget that Framber's like 28 now. And Javier's only 25, I guess. I think he just turned 25. And
Framber, I think, is older than Carlos Correa,
which is crazy. But a lot of these guys, the international signings came in like that. Look, Jose Urquidy is like 29. I want to say, or 30. He's closing in on 30. Like some of those international signing guys, they were a little bit older to begin with, and so that kind of happens. Javier, I am fascinated to see if he can just look. Last year we saw Luis Garcia come out of the gate like hot, right before he was injured. Christian Javier, I feel like he's a guy that could come out of the gate hot, but the key to me is, can he sustain that excellence over the course of an entire season? And obviously the Astros are prioritizing health and longevity this year. They're gonna be some guys who are gonna get playing time and get taken out for games here and there and rested. They're obviously going to do that more than they did last year. So I just want to see if he can sustain it. That's the biggest thing for me.
Well, and I know we're going to talk about more guys, but I will say this: that a constant theme for me with a lot of the pitchers, the starters specifically, but you could even throw the relievers into this point. But on Javier, and we mentioned Joe Espada earlier in the show. Like, to me, the fascinating overarching theme about the pitching is how these guys are managed.
Yep.
How are these guys managed? Javier specifically, I think that's been a challenge for the Astros for as long as they've had him, is how to exactly manage him, what exactly to do with him.
Right.
We know what his role is now, so that part of it isn't as complicated. But I still feel like, he runs into, it feels like he runs into a wall at some point. Or I don't know, and we talked about him being jacked, maybe he's in better shape. I don't know exactly what it is, but how he's managed does seem to be like a really big key. Yeah. And that's going to be the case for any other name that you throw out there from the rotation through really, and how they, sort things out with the bullpen, which I think we kind of have a good sense for what that's going to look like. But how it's managed, and shout out to Joe Espada getting, and I mentioned how talented the team is, but how it's managed is going to be huge, Jeff.
And Josh Miller and, the other pitching coaches in particular who are so good at getting these guys ready.
Yeah.
You're right. Managing them is going to be a big deal. All right. Who you got? I went with Javier. Who you got?
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to go with Fromber, and for reasons that I think you're going to appreciate. I think he looks like he's in better shape. To your point about Christian Javier,
Went back to the old school hair.
but also he went back to the old school hair.
Oh, you're bringing it up. That's awesome.
Oh, dude, I love Fromber. Okay?
Yeah, me too. Who doesn't?
Love the guy. I think for all of his positives, and I appreciate pretty much everything about the guy. Okay?
How can you not love a guy who makes his own T-shirts and then brings them to the clubhouse and gives them out to everybody? I mean, how can you not love a dude like that? It's just amazing.
Yeah, and some of the work that he does in his hometown, like he seems like a fun dude, a good dude. I have no more notes on Fromber as far as liking him and the positives. The one thing that he's ever done that's bothered me, which I have no governor on, he's a grown man, free to do what he wants, but it was that doggone weave ponytail that all these guys, him and Martin Maldonado, as a man who grew out his dreadlocks and grind and put out the grind, have dedicated a lot of time, a lot of years, and a lot of energy to growing out dreadlocks. The fact that they just attached some on the back of their afros did not make me feel good at all. I didn't appreciate that at all.
Brandon, you don't understand how well I understand this, because when I was a young fellow a number of years ago, I had hair all the way down to my waist. It took me years and years and years of growing. And I'll have to show you pictures sometime. I'll probably pop one up on the video so people can see it. I looked like the guy from Metallica. I was like, that was the deal. So yes, 100%. Don't cheat that. Don't cheat that. Do the work. Do the work, man.
There is a work ethic that is tied to growing your hair, especially in
dreadlocks like yours. I mean, that is
especially with dreadlocks.
So difficult.
Yeah. So I that was one part for me. I'm just like, but now that he's back, and another thing, that you gotta keep in mind is like, man, dreadlocks are heavy. Oh, I'm able to pull it off, and I just cut mine a little bit, to make it less heavy. But I'm able to pull it off because I don't pitch from a mound. I don't play sports for a living.
Right.
If I did, maybe I'd look at it a little bit differently. But I like his chances. I like his chances of between slimming down and looking like he's in better shape and having a little less, let's say, not authentic. I was going to say inauthentic, non-authentic hair on the back of his head. I think it's going to benefit him well. But also, like, on a serious note, the bounce back.
Yeah,
right?
I agree with you.
The year before, we're talking about the consecutive quality starts, and we felt like he had really elevated into sort of this upper echelon, and now we're reaching a point to where we're going to be talking about paying a lot of these guys. That's another overarching theme of watching guys,
especially next year, but this year
pay
too.
Guys, right. But the more you start thinking about the bigger picture, you're like, okay, there's a list of guys that are going to be up eventually.
Yep.
And you know that you're going to have to make a decision at some point, that they're going to have to make a decision at some point. How does this year impact all of that?
Oh, yeah. I think this year will definitely.
There's a lot there.
Yeah, I think this year will definitely impact Fromber in that way, because I think the Astros will make a decision about. Look, Fromber's a guy who's not going to. Most pitchers, they're not going to get what hitters get. They're not getting 10 years, that kind of thing. So he's a guy that's going to get a 4 or 5 year deal at the end of this. And so he is a guy that the Astros have the opportunity to re-sign if they so choose to do that. And this year will go a long way towards, I think, both helping the Astros decide what they're going to do and figuring out how much he's going to get paid. Fromber is the thing that I love about Fromber Valdez as a pitcher is that he's the steadying influence in the bullpen. He's not a guy that's going to blow you away with heat. He's a change of pace from some of the other guys in this lineup. He's a lefty, which automatically makes him unique. But I think that the main thing is especially you saw with those quality starts, as 24 or whatever number of quality starts he had in a row, he was a guy that was the steady. You knew that every fifth day he was going to come in and he was going to give you a quality start. He was going to give you quality pitches. He was not going to give up a boatload of runs. He was going to keep the ball on the ground. And I think that is the thing I want to see him get back to, is that he doesn't have to be spectacular. He doesn't have to have an ERA under 2. He just needs to be a guy who comes in and gives them innings and steadies that ship. Because some of these guys, you don't know what you're going to get when they come in there. They could get blown up in 2 innings. Fromber's not one of those guys. You expect him to come in and just rock solid roll through it. And that's what I hope to see go back. Because, man, after his no-hitter last year, like, it went off the cliff, man. And, hopefully that he learned something from that, because he is, unlike Christian Javier, he plays with his emotions on his sleeve. And maybe that affected him a little bit. Who knows? But hopefully he can get back to where he was a couple of seasons ago, when he was just so good as the rock steady, second guy in that lineup. Maybe first.
Yeah, no, I think it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
If he can get back to that or maintain that, I mean, we're talking about an Astros team that should have, and Justin Verlander is probably his own kind of category, but having him back, and depending on what he is, but if he's some sort of stabilizing force, and you've got 2 of those at the top, and you're just talking about, then you're looking at going back to our Javier conversation. You're looking at some of the other guys, some of the younger guys.
They have a potential to have a 1-2-3 that's as good as any 1-2-3 in baseball.
The depth by the end of it could be incredible.
It could, and that's
think about. Yeah, when I think about this, Jeff, I felt like one of the lessons of the World Series, obviously after the Astros unfortunately were out of it, like the actual World Series itself, and the lesson from the Rangers was, we're talking about a team that won the World Series that did not have a good bullpen.
No.
They did not have a good bullpen at all.
Still don't.
But what they did have, and I think what allowed them to be successful, was this incredible amount of depth of starters.
Yep.
And so they were able to slug their way through the regular season and win 90 games, short of the division, but they were able to get in. And then when it came cutting time in the postseason, they had enough starters to make up for the fact that. And then I think their bullpen was a little bit better.
Yeah, it was
for what it was worth. But bringing it back to the Astros, that depth of starters by the long run, in the long haul, I think could be a huge feather in the cap.
I agree
for the Astros.
I agree, and I think there's going to be, and there's another guy on my list I'll mention in this coming up, but you see all the guys that pitched last year. That's not going to do anything but be good for them. The fact that JP France emerged as a legitimate guy who you can put in your starting rotation at the 4 or 5 spot, that's nothing but good for the Astros. All right, my second guy is Jake Meyers. And I know everybody's watching Jake Meyers. He's here's the thing about Jake Meyers with me. I'm going to be real frank. So I think Jake Meyers he could be one of the best defensive center fielders in baseball, like Miles Straw. But I'm going to compare him to Miles Straw because Miles Straw was here as an Astro. And we got, by the way, for Miles Straw, we got Yainer Diaz and Phil Maton, just FYI. Yeah. But right now, Miles Straw is fighting for his job in Cleveland. Why? Because he can't hit. He can't hit the ball. He's probably the best he's at least in the top 5 defensive center fielders in all of baseball, but he cannot hit the ball. And it sounds very familiar to me to another guy that on the Astros, Jake Meyers. Now, I believe that their starting outfield of Tucker, McCormick in left, and Jake Meyers in center, I think that's their best defensive lineup in the outfield. I think look, McCormick in left is going to be a stud. I mean, that guy, he's already good in center field, but in left field, he could be spectacular, especially at Minute Maid Park. But their best offensive lineup in the outfield is not close. I mean, it's Jordan in left with Chas McCormick in center and Tucker in right. That's their best offensive lineup in the outfield, especially now with Michael Brantley gone. So to me, I worry about a guy who's very good defensively in center field, but has to hit 9th, in the lineup. Not that I need Jake Myers to be like, Jordan Part 2. Not that I need Jake Myers to crush like 20 home runs and, hit 300. But I feel like Jake Myers has got to be respectable at the plate. He's got to be. And that's my big issue.
So can I have you possibly look at it a different way?
Okay, sure. Shoot.
And you tell me if this is crazy. It's probably an oversimplification, but this is also a way for me to kind of be positive about it, because I mean, I agree with your overall point and sentiment. But could Jake Myers, if he's going to be the hole in your lineup, could he just be better than Martin Maldonado?
Well, that's a strong point. And and defensive wins above replacement do matter, right? Your defensive WAR matters too. Jeremy Pena was not as good offensively last year, but his defensive abilities in the infield. So that's a good point, man. That's Brandon. That's a very good point. So man, obviously they play different positions, and so you know the math there is okay. And funny enough, I think this is kind of I don't know if a cliffhanger or a tease to my next guy to watch. But what's the difference that you're getting from whatever the positional value was of Martin Maldonado, which, if we're honest, took a downslide last season? So what's the math going to be on what you're missing from him defensively versus what you're going to actually get from his replacement? Right. And then in the actual lineup, because I mean he's going to be much higher in the order than Maldonado was, and then in the actual lineup, Jake Myers could very well hit ninth. Right. Or Jeremy Pena. I don't know. Probably Jake Myers. So, can that guy be better than what was honestly the worst? You're pulling a money ball right now. You're basically let's fix it in the aggregate, right?
Yes.
Let's fix it in the aggregate. And that's what I was trying to say. That's a good point. Like it's a good point, especially if he gives you great defense in center field. And I'm going to be watching, just for me in this spring training, for me watching him, I just want to see what he can do at honestly, I think Jake Myers there's been a lot. He can hit the ball. He's got some power, but I would love to see him hit to opposite fields. I'd love to see him do what Chas McCormick does right now, which is take the pitches that he's given, let the ball travel, hit to other parts of the ballpark. Don't try to pull it every single time. I think that would, and look, if he could become Mauricio Dubon, right? In hitting, that's the guy I would take. That's the guy I would take as my example of what to do.
Well, let me ask you this, and just as a devil's advocate to even the idea that Jake Myers is their best defensive option in center field, which I'm not saying I disagree with, but just as a thought exercise here, are we not at all worried about his arm anymore?
Well, it improved significantly last year. That's the thing. By the middle to the end of last year, the strength that he had lost in his shoulder appeared to have come back. Now, is he ever going to have a cannon? No. He's not going to be Yordan Alvarez, who throws the ball at 101 or whatever from the outfield, or even Kyle Tucker, who's got Tucker too. Yeah. He's got incredible, and not Tucker's skill is not just his strength, but his accuracy is ridiculous from the outfield. I mean, he can get guys out at second base. It's remarkable. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, there is that question mark, and I think a lot of that's going to shake out in spring training. Now, I am very excited to get to your next one, because I'm assuming you're talking about Yainer Diaz here, who is not on my list, but I'm so glad you brought him up, because I might not be more excited for any Astro this coming season than Yainer Diaz.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know. I'm excited for all of it. I hadn't thought about it like that. Maybe I'm right there with you, but I am very excited about it. And I think it really ties into some of our earlier picks on this list, the pitchers that we talked about. Yeah. Some of the ones that we've talked about and some of the ones that we haven't yet. How Yainer Diaz, I mentioned how these guys are managed, how Christian Javier is managed, right? How Framber Valdez in some ways is managed. I think in a different way. I'm talking about Framber, just in terms of the emotions, the moments, reeling them back in. I think there was a quality to Martin Maldonado that is not. I think it's an understatement for me to say it like this, but I don't think it's easily replicated. I
agree with you, and the pitchers would agree with you. I mean, I think the pitchers loved throwing to Martin Maldonado. I think they loved the game that he called. So yeah, no, you're not wrong.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how I'm going to get a great sense for that from spring training.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it is something that I'm thinking about as they report, as I'm watching them. I'm like, how's this going to work out? Because I'm right there with you, Jeff, in terms of the excitement. Like, that was my, I remember last year when Dusty was getting all the criticism, I was saying, hey, man, my primary Dusty criticism is the Yainer Diaz thing. A lot of the other stuff to me felt nitpicky and piling on. But I was right there with everyone I was like, man, this guy. I mean, we've got to do this, Dusty.
Well, the Astros. Look, when was the last time the Astros had a catcher that could do that at the plate? I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, it's been a long time. We might have to go back to post skill set Pudge Rodriguez when he came here for a very short period of time at the end of his career. Like the Astros, like Tony Eusebio was a good hitter, but he was an inconsistent hitter. Also he was, he sat in his chair. He was 137 years old, but but I mean, there aren't really, when you go back, was Alan Ashby didn't hit like this. I mean, we can go back a long ways and say, maybe Biggio, right? When he was catching before he went to second base. So that
was going to be my name.
That was the first. This is the first time we've really had a guy at catcher where you can say, man, this is not the guy you stick ninth in your lineup. And and the thing that has impressed me about Yainer from the beginning is his plate awareness. Like, he's not a guy that chases very much, right? He's going to get you strikeouts because he's in his, basically his rookie season. He's going to have some, but overall, he's not a guy that just goes up there and flails away at pitches. He hits to all different parts of the park. He'll drive the ball for doubles as well as for home runs. I think it's going to be fun watching him at the plate this year. I really do. And if they do worry about the managing games, look, Victor Caratini was brought in here for a reason. He's a veteran who's had he's also a switch hitter, by the way, who switch hits anymore? But he's a guy that I think can provide some of that stability and certainly hopefully can stay in Yainer's ear a little bit when it comes to managing, pitchers and their expectations.
Yeah, the Astros offense ended up being, by the end of the season, a lot better than I thought it was.
Yeah, me too.
And I think it progressed over time. Yeah. But imagine taking that, which is mostly the same, and then inserting, a more consistent and a more experienced Yainer Diaz.
Well, imagine
I'm excited about that.
Imagine Yainer in your lineup and Chas McCormick in your lineup every day. I mean, Chas was in and out of the lineup, and he was one of only 3 guys that had an 800 OPS or better. I mean, you automatically you're going to improve just, I think, from those guys. So that's I'm super excited about Yainer. My number 3 is one that I think is my good friend Katya, who is a huge baseball fan, has been forever. She will tell you that no one should ever trust this guy, but my guy is Forrest Whitley. So I am absolutely fascinated to watch Forrest Whitley. And here's the main reason why. Look, we look at Forrest Whitley, and I've talked about this before. It seems like he's been in the Astros system for like 100 years. But Forrest Whitley is only 26 years old, right? And the thing about him is that he has now accepted the fact that he's probably not going to be a starter in his career, but he has the stuff to be a reliever. And if he comes in and can stay healthy, and that's always the big if with him, that 1-year suspension for weed notwithstanding, if he is healthy, he is potentially your bridge guy at the bullpen. He is potentially your 5th and 6th inning guy who can come in and bridge you to what are probably is going to be the 3 best, final relievers in baseball this year in the bullpen. And so to me, I want to see that happen. Now, this is probably wishful thinking on my part, because God knows we've all been waiting for Forrest Whitley since the dawn of time. But man, if Forrest Whitley can come in here, we've got some other guys out there, Brian Bielek, maybe Rafael Montero, if he can spring back. But honestly, when you look at it, Forrest Whitley has a real chance to be like a guy in the bullpen, not just not just some random dude thrown in, but someone who can legitimately come in and be good for them. I mean, if Forrest Whitley works out, you could have 4 guys at the back end of your bullpen rotation who could legitimately come in and be solid. So anyway, I'm probably putting too much on his shoulders. It's probably not fair, but this might be his last shot at the majors, if we're being honest. Even at 26.
I actually love that he's even on your list, because I've done the thing. I think it's been years now that I've kind of just put Forrest Whitley to the side and said out of sight, out of mind until he shows up.
Right.
I'm not going to really give him much thought. But I like that you have him on the list, because I do also like to play the what if game.
Yes.
Just again, as a thought exercise, as a conversation piece, not even as, hey, I'm putting any kind of hope or, like you said, putting too much on him. I ain't putting nothing on him.
You
at
can't.
This point, Jeff.
You can't.
I can't.
I want to. Believe me, I want to. But you can't.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
I'd love to. But I don't feel like you can, not fairly. And it's just a fun what if.
I know.
Because everything that you just laid out in a what if scenario, if that were to happen, dude, we're on to something. Because you mentioned Montero and Belak, like, he's better than those guys.
Oh yeah.
If he's right, if he's better, he's better than those guys.
His stuff is arguably some of the best in the bullpen rotation outside of Hader and Presley. And he could easily be one of the better just stuff pitchers if he can get his stuff, if he can get healthy and keep it together. Because the deal is, when he's pitched, like last year he was pitching at Sugar Land, he had some wipeout stuff at times, but he's got to pull it all together and do it at the big league level and do it and be healthy.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that it's the last year, because who knows?
Yeah, he's still 26.
But it does feel like every year that we do this with Forrest Whitley, it feels like, I think it's just obvious. The clock is ticking.
Yes.
How many times are we going to do the what ifs? Because I feel like we've done it before.
Look, we have a guy on the roster this year who we did it with for years in John Singleton, who suddenly he was like back with the team and might actually end up on the roster, the 26-man roster. Yeah, we are not immune to the vagaries of desperation when it comes to players who've been in the minors for a long time. All of us want to see those guys, especially with an Astros minor league system that's like ranked 29th, I think, out of 30 teams. You want to see somebody other than the guys who we're expecting to come up, and maybe Whitley's that guy this year. I hope he is.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Dusty Baker used to talk about spring training, wanting to see some surprises. Like, kind of to your point, what to expect from certain guys, but who's going to surprise you? And if Forrest Whitley could be that guy, this does feel like a if not now then when kind of year for him. But if it could be that, man,
100%,
dude.
All right, who you got next?
Yeah, man. So next for me is gonna be Justin Verlander, and that's just because of the headline, man. I think out of everybody that we could list, he's probably the most reliable because he's Justin Verlander. But he's also, 40 plus now.
Yep.
And so I don't know what to do with
that is a great way of putting it. Like, I don't know what to do with Justin Verlander, because you can't doubt him. You can never doubt him, because he's a guy that the minute you doubt him, he comes in and just blows everyone out of the water. He's the closest thing we have to a Nolan Ryan in this era, for sure, in terms of his longevity and his ability to pitch innings. But you're right. You don't know can you pencil him in and say, we've got 160 innings out of him this year? Or is it like, it's a good point, man.
Well, because here's how I'm thinking about it. Is there any drop off? Because there's drop off from Cy Young Verlander, who left the Astros, to stabilizing quality starter Verlander, who pitched for the Mets and the Astros last year.
Yep.
Those guys were not exactly the same.
No.
If you could get last year's guy, if you told me punch a ticket now and I give you last year's guy over any kind of I'll take last year's guy. But what's the attrition? Is there a level of drop off? And is that still, plus level quality starter?
Yeah.
I think it is, even if you get that. But to what degree is there a drop off, if there's any? I'm not saying that there's going to be one, but what does it look like? I mean, the first thing you hear from the guy is I'm a little sore.
Yeah, right.
And so you're
of course,
yeah,
but he
I figure
says
so. You're 40.
He says that, right? It's amazing. He says that. Then he immediately comes in, throws a bullpen session. The next day feels completely fine. Then he's about to throw another bullpen session. The spot is like, yeah, he feels good. It's like, listen, he's 40. Once you hit 40, as I can sadly attest, your body doesn't respond as well as it used to. There isn't the immediate bounce back. For whether you're athletes, whether you're married to Kate Upton, it doesn't really matter. There's, it's there. The body has aches and pains that it doesn't get over as easily. But he's still Justin Verlander. It's like, how do you? I feel like right now this point in his career, I don't view him as an ace number one any longer. I view him as a solid number two or a very, very good number three kind of guy in your rotation. But it wouldn't shock me if he comes out and, suddenly for a while is throwing sub-2 ERA and striking everybody out. It's just, who knows? It's a really good point on your part, Brandon, to say you don't know what you're going to get from him.
Well, so I think how the kids overuse the term built different. So-and-so's built different.
Yep.
This person's built different. I'm built different.
Yeah, right.
You hear that a lot these days. I do think Justin Verlander is got to be along those lines because he wins another Cy Young late in his career after Tommy John surgery.
He's a throwback.
And to be in rarefied air and what he did in that particular way, I think deserves some recognition.
Yeah.
But then on the back end, I do think you have to fairly ask the question, what is the toll of coming back from Tommy John surgery late in your 30s and then pitching a Cy Young caliber season the next year and a borderline really good, I would say really good, not necessarily great season the year after
Very
that.
solid.
You know what I mean? And then now you're 41.
Yep.
So the pile up there, the combination there. Now, what is the residual effect of that now? I think is a fair thing to wonder about. And I do wonder about, even if I acknowledge that Justin Verlander is not is unlike most.
He is unlike, he's certainly unlike any Astros pitcher we've had in recent memory. And you go back and see some older guys. So speaking of pitchers, the number 4 guy on my list is Spencer Arrighetti. And so this one is, to me, look, I've been kind of on the Spencer Arrighetti bandwagon a bit for a while, since late last year. Split his time between Double and AAA last year, came up, has kind of done everything you need to do to demonstrate it. In fact, I just saw this morning that he threw his first bullpen session and literally the entire Astros brass was out to watch him, which tells you something about how they value him and where they think he is. He was left out of the deal last year that brought Verlander. I mean, he was on the list of one of the guys that could potentially be traded in that Verlander deal. He was left off along with Jacob Melton, who are two of their better prospects. Melton, number 1, I think Arrighetti's 4. Here's my thing about Arrighetti. I don't think he's going to make the big league ball club, not because he can't pitch at this level, but because I think they aren't going to want to put him in the bullpen. And unless he comes out just being lights out in spring training, I'm not sure they're going to have a spot for him in the rotation. And I don't think they want to, tone him down into a bullpen pitcher, because I think ultimately he is a starter and he's stretched out to be a starter. And I just don't think they're going to suddenly say, hey, let's throw him in the bullpen and let him work his way up there. Some guys you can do that with. There's some guys that have that flexibility. Look, Brian Abreu used to be a starter, and now he's a great arm in the bullpen. But I think when you're looking at a guy like this, he is a guy who you're going to want to start. Now, having said all that, because they have such a log jam at the starting rotation, especially when they get Luis Garcia and Lance McCullers back, if Lance McCullers ever comes back. Again, speaking of a guy you can't count on, I do think he is going to be part of that rotation going forward. And I do think there's a chance he gets called up if there's injuries. Look, they're going to start the season probably with a 6-man rotation because they've got a boatload of games in their first 2 months of the year. And Verlander, as much as he always complained about, I want to pitch on 5 days rest or whatever, it's like, sit down. You can skip a start if we need to with Verlander if it keeps you healthy for the postseason. But look, Arrighetti, the guy has legit stuff. His demeanor is unique. He's super calm. Like nothing phases him. He's very Christian Javier in that way. And it's almost his time. May not quite be his time, but it's close. And I'm excited to watch him. I hope somebody took some video of his bullpen sessions, of his throwing this morning, his bullpen session. Yeah. I'd love to see a little bit of it because I think he's an exciting young pitcher, one of the few really exciting prospects in the Astros farm system.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. One of the few guys that you can be like legitimately excited about in the farm system. I love that you mentioned him. And I don't want to do this, Jeff, to like pit guys against each other, even though we do know, like the reality in sports, there is competition within. Like you're not just competing against the opponent, but in a lot of times, especially in spring training, you're competing against each other.
Yep.
But when I look at the long view of it, I'm like, man, what is, when I talk about what ifs with Forrest Whitley, who we think is, if he does have a career in the big leagues now, is a reliever. Mm-hmm. But Arrighetti, like, what if he's as good? What if like he lives up to the hype, and how that could impact your future decisions and what your rotation could look 100%. Like further down the line?
Look, if Arrighetti suddenly becomes your guy, your Urquidy can become a bullpen guy. He has been in the bullpen in the past, and he's pitched well coming out of the bullpen. Suddenly, you increase your arms there. There's a lot that can happen with Arrighetti, and also JP France for that matter, that can really impact how the Astros, not just rotation works, but how their bullpen works.
Yeah, well, and especially in the postseason, I'm looking at it. Yeah. Like the point I mentioned earlier about the Rangers, this surplus of starter quality arms on top of the fact that if you include, let's just for the dreaming of it, include Forrest Whitley in this mix. If you've got this quality of guys in your bullpen, like your actual relievers go something like, your throwaways or, Montero and whatever else you got, but your actual high leverage guys are some combination of, Whitley, Abreu, Presley, and Josh Hader, who's been the best reliever in baseball for as long as the Astros have been on this run. A lot of people don't pay attention to this, Jeff, because it's been happening in the National League. I think, maybe most of the people listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
But I remember in spring training, no disrespect to Ryan Presley, but when they were like, they're revealing that Josh Hader is the closer, or like it was a headline.
That's not a shock. It shouldn't be any shock to anybody, including Presley.
And I'm like, the only way this is surprising to anyone is if for whatever reason you just never heard of Josh Hader, just like didn't know who he is. But that's a good thing, though.
Yes.
Like you've got this guy, but then you've got Presley, who was already an elite setup man, showed you he was good enough to be a high-level closer. Yeah. Can go back to being the elite setup man that he already was, and that betters the team.
Unreal.
Presley got paid, as a closer.
Abreu probably could be the closer. You've got legitimately 3 guys that could be the closer at the back end of your rotation.
I feel like everyone's winning here.
I know. Agreed.
I feel like everybody's eating here.
All right, who you got next?
Yeah, so next for me, you took Jake Myers.
It's okay.
But next for me is got to be Kyle Tucker.
Boy, that's a good one, Bryn.
And it's really, it's only because, it was 2 reasons. Things kind of flamed out a little bit there at the end, and I feel like there's some recency bias on what Kyle Tucker is.
Agreed.
It didn't look good there at the end in the postseason run, but he's still one of the better players in baseball. Anytime I know that we mention something about Kyle Tucker on our social media or write a story, anything that we do, the feedback we'll get is like, he's overrated, he's not worth the money.
Yes.
And it's like, guys.
The perception of him is fascinating. There's no doubt about it.
How quickly we forget. I mean, we're talking about one of the top 2 or 3 right fielders in baseball.
Yes.
The only others that would even be in the conversation would be, Mookie Betts and Aaron Judge. And then I guess you could throw, if you wanted to consider one. So, but he's right around that echelon. And people forget this because he had a crappy postseason or unlucky run there. Even when he's bad, man, he's hitting the ball hard. People get impatient with that being explained to you. Like, I don't care if he hits the ball hard, he hits it right to somebody. But, man, he's just got the traits. He's got the qualities. He's got the demeanor. Even though he's really hard on himself and internalizes a lot, he still seems to kind of have the demeanor that you like. I found it interesting, the note about him wearing batting gloves this year. I can't wait to actually see him.
The great glove versus no glove debate that has raged now for years with Kyle Tucker.
I definitely want to chat with him about that at some point.
To me, you really nailed it with this the weird expectations with Kyle Tucker. He is enigmatic, right? For fans, he's hard to pin down, and part of it is his personality. He's a quiet, dude. He's not a demonstrative guy. Part of it is his play is so spread out over a lot of things, right? There's not like, you look at Jordan, you go, well, Jordan hits home runs, right? You look at certain guys, Justin Verlander throws strikeouts. Like, there are certain things you can look at guys and you can sort of pin them down on certain things. Kyle Tucker just does everything well. And so it's hard when he has a little bit of a slump at the plate, or, he had a couple of defensive gaffes last year that were out of character for him. I think the whole team defensively was down. He's a guy that I think for fans, they just don't know what to do with him, right? Yeah. And so a lot of people feel like, well, he hasn't fulfilled that purpose of being, to be that elite level. But he is elite. It's just that I think people don't see it because there isn't, and part of it might be in defensive fans who have issues. Kyle Tucker has some issues with consistency at times. He just does at the plate. He's an up and down kind of hitter. But my goodness, the guy is so good in so many ways that you're right. Recency bias, which I love that term. It's so true in so many things, but I think really because of the postseason that Tucker had. And I think we just there haven't been any singular Kyle Tucker moments, right? That we look at and we go, that's when Kyle Tucker became an Astro. There's no home run off of Aroldis Chapman. There's no, turning the game upside down. There's no hitter or whatever it is. There isn't that sort of signature, we can look at Kyle Tucker and go, that's the moment he became a legend to Astros fans. And I think with that, so it's going to be, I think this year is a big year for him. Look, next year is his final year before free agency. There's still the question of if the Astros are going to extend him. Everything I hear is the dude wants a lot of years, and the Astros don't typically give a lot of years. So that's a good call, man, on watching Kyle Tucker. He's got to I think he needs to get out of the gate fast.
Yeah. To me, the more disappointing part, you talked about the inconsistency. Baseball's hard. That's there. He has that. Mm-hmm. I think he does some things consistently that makes you feel good about him, even when he's not hitting well at the plate. But also the disappointing part, more so, and you touched on this, the defense. Yeah. That's the thing that took a step back that was hard for me to understand or explain. I honestly don't understand it and can't explain it.
Yeah, just made weird because he made weird jumps on balls at times, and just didn't seem to see the ball as well last year for some reason.
Very strange. So part of the thing that I'm interested in past spring training, just in following Kyle Tucker this year, is will he get back to elite level defensive right fielder Kyle Tucker that he had been in previous years? And I do expect him to still continue to be one of the better hitting outfielders in baseball. That's because that's what he actually is. He had a bad postseason. We've seen Altuve have a bad postseason. Jordan's first postseason was atrocious, or at least that. I mean, I don't know if this was the entire postseason or if I'm just thinking about the World Series 2019. But he had a stretch there where it was like, oh, what happened to Jordan?
Yeah.
Like everybody goes through this.
Correct.
I think you made an interesting point that I hadn't thought about with Kyle is that he doesn't have that signature hit.
Or really,
I think
there's a lot of things you don't think back and go, what is that? Like I can look at almost every Astro and go, what is that one moment what was the one Chas McCormick moment? It's the immaculate catch, right? Where there's the thing on the snow angel in the dirt where he caught that ball. You can look at almost every Astro and say, here's that moment. Tucker.
Trey Mancini has one.
Trey Mancini has one. John Singleton had a 2 home run game last year. I mean, there are signature moments for everybody. Kyle Tucker, he had that one home run catch takeaway that he had last year. But you don't see that. I think that's something that's, like I said, enigmatic. I think it's something that's just hard for Astros fans to grab onto because he's just so consistently good at so many things. But there isn't that one thing you're just like, oh, that's like the moment. Hopefully he has it this year. I mean, God knows he's due.
Yeah, he's the one guy who I think is gonna even has any justification for commanding one of those ridiculous contracts that are a lot of years that I actually side with the Astros and being mostly philosophically opposed to giving out because I get it, but he does intrigue me in that way.
Well, sure. Well, he's the guy that if you're going to do it, it's him because he's so young. Like, you give a 9-year deal to a 25-year-old. It's a lot different than giving it to a 30-year-old. And so he's the one guy you can sort of say, look, maybe you should open up your negotiations in that regard and sign him till he's 37, which is a lot different than signing him till he's 41 or whatever, like that. Some of those crazy deals that guys get 11 years and they're going to be like 50 when it's all over.
It's always stood out to me. Is it 2 seasons ago now when Jordan signed his extension?
Yes.
Well, they were negotiating with Kyle, I feel like, around the same time.
Yep. They were.
And they got a deal with Jordan and didn't get a deal with Tucker. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that they offered him something similar.
Yep.
Like,
I'm sure.
Not entirely sure.
My guess is they didn't offer him as much as they offered Alvarez.
Maybe not. Yeah. So, when you think about that, it's like, okay, Alvarez took the deal. Tucker is viewing his worth a little bit differently. Yep. So this thing is going to play out. All right. So what does this season look like? Does he put up another, another high caliber season?
Yeah.
But with the defense returning back to what it used to be, he's got to be a guy to watch.
All right, my last guy is Jeremy Pena. And listen, everybody all eyes are going to be on Pena. They're already on him. We've already watched his swing mechanics kind of ad nauseum in this preseason. Here's the thing about Pena. And his average was higher last year. His on-base percentage was higher. His walk percentage was higher. His strikeout percentage was lower, right? He did virtually everything well at the plate and better than his previous season. He was also exceptional defensively as usual. The problem for Pena is he lost his drive capability. And I don't mean power because he hit the ball hard on the ground plenty. But he wasn't hitting the ball to the gaps. He certainly wasn't hitting home runs. He didn't have a home run the last 2.5 months of the season or whatever it was. The mechanics that they worked on were specifically geared towards calming his swing down, which we've seen that from Pena. He had the leg kick for a while, and then he got rid of the leg kick. To me, a lot of what has happened with Jeremy Pena, because he did improve his ability to hit the breaking pitch last year. He still struggles a little, but it's better than it was. The thing to me about Jeremy Pena is it's partly launch angle. It's partly barreling the ball, which he's obviously spent a lot of time working on. But for me, because he is already a strong guy, because he already has pop in his bat naturally, if he adjusts his swing angle, I think he can get back to the guy we saw his rookie season. I don't ever think of. I think maybe the expectation because of his postseason that year was so exceptional. I think we may have overblown where we think he should be as a starting shortstop. Also coming off the fact that Correa was the guy before him. I do think Pena should be a 20 home run a year guy. Do I think he should be 25, 30? Probably not. I've never thought really that he's that guy. But he should hit a bunch of doubles because he's got speed, and he should be excellent defensively. So I'm going to be watching that swing. I'm going to be seeing how he lines up against pitching. And I think, to me, the key for him this year is, can he get the ball in the air more? Can he barrel the ball up? And can he improve his pitch selection when he does it? And if he can do that, then I think he can elevate his game beyond being an average hitter and a great defensive player.
Yeah, I think that's all Will said. For me, it's a lot of the part of Jeremy Pena and the outsized expectations.
Yes.
I think really it was the playoff run of his rookie year, and obviously winning those awards.
Yep.
World Series MVP, like all of that on top of what you mentioned with replacing Correa. It's like, Carlos Correa, who? And it's
right.
like, guys. So I even remember early that rookie year, one of our local news stations here in town was running like a Correa versus Pena graphic, like daily in the beginning of the season. And I was like, guys, this is not necessary.
No.
Like, what are we doing?
Pena's not a 30. He's not a 30-30 guy. Maybe on his best season, but Correa is a guy that legitimately has real power. He has real. It's they're very different types of players. He certainly doesn't have the arm strength Correa has either.
Yeah. So, I mean, you just look at his numbers last year, Pena, that is. I mean, the expected stats, all of the batting stats are just unforgiving.
Yeah, his XBAs are not good. That's been none of it. Yeah. And I think mostly that's because he hit the ball on the ground so much. I mean, that was part of the problem. He didn't get the ball up, and that was his biggest issue. He didn't chase as much. His chase rate was lower. But the big problem for him is he just didn't elevate the ball. And when you don't elevate the ball, it's going to get fielded, even with the new fielding rules in place. Guys are just ground balls are going to get caught by guys. I mean, that's just kind of how it works. And so it's going to be harder for a guy like Pena to get better numbers when you just keep hitting the ball on the ground all the time.
Yeah, but to your point about his eye being a little bit better, his discipline at the plate being a little bit better. I mean, you talked about his both strikeouts went down and walks went up. Mm-hmm. I would say strikeouts not as significantly, but walks fairly significantly.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Getting him on the base path is important because he can run.
Because of the speed, yeah. So I feel good about that. I am not, and maybe it's because of the outside expectations. I've tried to temper my expectations for Pena and just identify him for what I believe he is, which is a somewhat average to sometimes sketchy to below average hitting, but elite defensive shortstop, which I would take on a team like this, as long as you've got other guys and like you mentioned, the speed on the base paths. The strength, obviously, the build and the power if he does make contact, and if he is, the launch angle and barreling the ball and things like you mentioned, if he's actually doing those things, he can provide some pop for you in the lineup as well.
If he improves, if he can improve his average, and if he becomes a 260 hitter, right? Yeah. Then he becomes kind of a prototypical number 2 in your lineup, right? Which is where he's hit the best, in his career. He becomes a guy that you get him on base enough, especially if you can get his OPS his on base percentage, his OBS, excuse me. If you get that up, in the 300s, then there's a real good reason to put him at number 2, and he becomes that kind of perfect hitter for there. You don't have to hit loads of home runs in the second spot in the lineup. You just have to get on base. But if he doesn't, then you're going to have to put him further down the lineup. He's going to be a 7 or 8 guy.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm strong, either optimistic or pessimistic, but I am very intrigued by it, because I think where I'm at with it is that I became resigned to what I felt like he was last year.
Yeah, Brandon, that's right. Like me too.
I feel like I'm okay with it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'll take it if he, if there's any of the improvements or the things that we just talked about.
Agreed. All right, who's your last guy?
I feel like it's got to be Alex Bregman. I don't know if we can
I'm
get out of here
so
without,
glad you brought him up. He was probably in my number 6, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, well, and I think one of the ones that we probably shared was Jake Myers, but because that would have been one that I would have mentioned. But I don't think we can get out of here without mentioning him. You know,
you have
Alex Bregman, big year. The spring training headline that stood out to me from Alex was the 23 pounds or 20, whatever, however many pounds he said he's gained. It's more than 20, which I thought was a little odd because I didn't find that necessary.
He's been eating a lot of Breggy Bomb salsa. So it's been
yeah, maybe so.
Crushing the chips.
Far be it from me. Yeah, far be it from me to give Alex Bregman dietary advice.
It's an interesting.
I won't do it.
It is a really interesting headline too, because like Bregman, it's never struck me that Bregman's skill set has come from his strength. Most of his skill set comes from the fact that he has one of the quickest bats in baseball. I mean, he turns on a ball as quick as anybody does, and he's so nimble at third base for a guy that's not like huge with a good arm. I never thought of him as a guy that needed to pack on extra strength. Now, maybe it's for longevity, maybe it's for injury reasons or whatever, but it is interesting. You're right.
Well, but for me, especially after the last couple of years of being healthy.
Yeah.
You know, he went through that 2 or 3 year stretch, whatever it was, with all the soft tissue injuries.
Yeah.
And then you look at the last couple of years and he's, you know, close to Iron Man.
What did he play 160 games last year? Something crazy? I mean,
almost all of them. Yeah. No, he's and the year before I feel like he played a significant number of the games, if I'm not mistaken.
And let's be honest, they need him because there ain't nobody behind him. I mean, I don't even think they have they don't really even have a third baseman. They probably won't have a backup third baseman in their 26-man roster, which is crazy. Now, they've got this kid, Zach DeZenzo, in the minor leagues, who's on the 40-man, who has the potential to be their third baseman of the future. But he's not ready yet. And so he's going to have to play a bunch of games because you're going to put it third. I
hadn't thought about it that way. That's a good point, too. And maybe it's because he has been Iron Man the last couple of years. He hasn't really had to worry about it much. But yeah, no, that's a good way to think about it. Obviously, the contract stuff is right there. You know, all of that is looming over a guy that we're talking about who's got a contract coming up in the next year or two.
I just can't see them.
He's the obvious one.
I just can't see them extending him. I'd love for them to extend him because I think he fits this team perfectly. He's been here a long time. He's really entrenched in the community and with the ball club. I just don't see it because I look, he's a Scott Boras guy. We've read all about the Scott Boras 4 that are still out there on the, that still haven't signed contracts yet, that are still sitting out there because they want better deals. I just have a hard time imagining Bregman being a guy who's like, excuse me, I'll take 5-6 years and whatever money. And I see people talk about, too, the amount per year. I don't think he cares. I think he wants length. I don't think he wants this to be the last deal he signs, which who could blame him?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he already did the short extension, and even at the time, and it ended up being a reasonable deal. And, and I remember some of my friends were telling me at the time even that it was a reasonable deal. But I thought at the time, because Alex Bregman to me seemed to be on this ascension, maybe I had outsized expectations.
He was the third for MVP in 2019, I guess.
Or I thought he was he not second?
Yeah, he's second. You're right, second.
Right behind Trout. Yeah, I mean, there was a time there where I thought he was kind of lowballed a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
And again, it ended up being a decent deal. But, if I'm Alex Bregman, I might.
If I'm Alex Bregman, that's a terrible deal. I'm Alex Bregman. I went, And look, I just think that, again, I do not, and I'm with you. I do not disagree with the Astros' philosophy on signing long-term deals. As a whole, I think it is. Look, the Astros are going to be, for all of the complaints and bitchiness about Jim Crane and not spending, they're going to be top 5 in payroll this year. The last time they were top 5 in payroll was 2019, when they had arguably the best team of this entire era. So they're going to be really, really good. They're going to spend a lot of money. But I'm with them. On this, I don't know, signing guys for 10 years, does it ever work out?
Yeah. Yeah, no, a 10-year commitment is serious no matter what the context is.
Yeah, I don't care who it is. Excuse me. Even Ohtani got that money. I don't know. Is Ohtani going to be that good? 10 years?
Well, so that's different because Ohtani comes with a lot of other things.
Right.
That I think go beyond just
if he can pitch again.
The question. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think if he can pitch again and who knows, maybe he becomes like a reliever or something, or just like, I don't know. But if he can pitch again, Ohtani represents a lot of other things that go beyond just the question that you asked, will he be still
the question
good
does
whenever.
come up. If he's not a pitcher, did you just sign a DH to a 10-year? If he isn't able to pitch, did you just give $700 million to a DH?
But again though, the fame and the notoriety, everything outside of just the actual game itself that it brings. Like I think we expect him to be a good hitter as long as he can stand. I think he'll be a good hitter. But so there will be some utility to him baseball wise because he can hit. He's a big old dude who can hit and hit left-handed.
100%.
But the other stuff is really just added bonus because we've seen it before. It's the reason why he got this deal. And then there's the fame, I think, domestically and internationally, to where you could make the argument that the Dodgers will make their money back before whatever money they spend on him, they might make that back before he's bad.
Yeah. No.
Like by the time he sucks, it's worked out.
There's no doubt about that. Well, Brandon, thank you so much, my friend, for joining me. Really appreciate it. What do you got going on? I know you seem to be on the radio a lot, which is good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see it. I know you do a lot of social media stuff and stuff, but you seem to be on there a bunch.
Yeah, I've got my weekly spots with The Drive. That's at 4:40 on Wednesdays. So
today,
I mean, it depends on what the season is, but we'll talk. Texans, Rockets. I think right now we're kind of in a Rockets mode. I wouldn't mind if we, switch that over to Astros at some point. But talk to them come hell or high water at 4:40 on Wednesdays, and I'm within the loop on Thursdays at 11. That's every week. So you can hear that. And then when any of those guys take off, I'm somewhere around lurking and able to come fill in and make it happen.
That's awesome,
I did
man.
that
I'm so
earlier
happy.
in the week, and I'll do it again. I'll do it again later in the week too. Y'all check me out with Landry, I think Friday from 11 to 2.
Nice. And,
so yeah.
And where do people find you on socials?
Yeah, so at Brandon K. Scott on X, formerly known as Twitter, at B. Scott from Hiram Clark, as Jeff mentioned earlier in the show, on Instagram. And on the side, I also do a Rockets podcast, H-Town Hoops podcast with Adam Spillane.
Yeah, that's a good podcast, by the way.
Astros.
You guys should tune into that. It is a good podcast, man. There's lots of good info in there. Rockets.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I grew up basketball first. That was my, it was
Same. Basketball
and baseball were real close for me, and I love football too. But so yeah, I follow the Rockets like crazy.
So exciting time over there.
It's exciting and complicated.
Yeah, well, I think the complication of it is the excitement for me, because it's been a long time since I could celebrate the actual basketball. Right. But the stories are a little bit more interesting now than they were before.
Absolutely.
Whether they win or lose.
Absolutely. So, it totally is. Well, Brandon, thanks so much for joining me. Guys, definitely go out, give him a follow on socials. Always good to look. We'll be back next week and I might have a little Friday update. I've been doing these little 5-minute Friday little updates on YouTube. I might do that again this week. You can give me a follow on Twitter, X, Instagram, at Believe in Astros, and me at Jeff Balke, pretty much everywhere you want. Subscribe on the YouTube channel so you get alerted to new videos. Keep leaving questions and comments. You guys are awesome about that. Really, really good stuff. And, of course, we're in the middle of spring training, so this is time to be paying close attention. Because, listen, once we get into the season, it's going to be too damn stressful to be, like, sitting around, like, conjecturing about whether Forrest Whitley is going to be good in the bullpen or not. Can't do that crap when the season starts. We got to worry about that right now. So thanks again, Brandon, for joining me. Thanks to you guys for listening. We'll talk to you next time. As always, go Astros.